Hi, my name is Adam Rodriguez, and I'll be talking about the anatomy of a rat versus a frog. So, giving a little background check on the frog, this classification involves its kingdom being Animalia, its phylum Chordata, class Amphibia, order Anura, family Ranidae, genus Rana, and the species we're talking about will be Raniforari. Its biotic factors include it feeding off of small invertebrates, its main predators are snakes and birds, and it has a lot of symbiotic relations with bacteria and fungi that help support it. Abiotic factors include that the temperature of its environment influences its breeding and function, and humidity can have a huge effect on the moisture of its skin and its respiratory system as well. And also, it is important that it has adequate access to freshwater sources. When looking at it in the food chain, grass frogs are typically in the middle and are secondary consumers that feed off insects for energy, while also being prey to predators such as birds, snakes, small land animals such as like raccoons and things, and also fish as well. Its ecological habitat is in the seasoned tropical forests and is distributed throughout Costa Rica, Mexico, Nicaragua, and Honduras. When looking at its mating, they typically occurs in the rain season, and this is due to the water sources that are available due to the rain. They have a special mating call that are specific to their species, and the fertilization process is through a unique process of amplicux that allows for the fertilization of the egg for the female. Once the female is fertilized, it lays egg in these shallow bodies of water, which then develops into tadpoles later on. Now switching over the rats, its classification includes kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order Rodentia, family Muridae, genus Rattus, and species Rattus norvidicus, which is what we're talking about. Its biotic factors include that it's omnivore; it can really eat anything, insects and plants, and is preyed upon by birds and cats primarily. Also, due to its high population, it usually competes with other rats and mammal species for food and shelter. And rats can also harbor and spread many diseases pretty quickly. Its abiotic factors include that it can seek shelter in numerous locations and is very good at hiding in places. It is found near water sources like sewers for drinking, and has a highly symptotic and is derived because in humid areas there's a high food availability. In the food chain, they typically feed on grains and fruits, but can also eat on insects. And like I mentioned, their main predators are birds, snakes, and cats, and are used as a source of energy in the food chain. They can also be scavengers and feed on waste materials and consume dead organic matter, and this kind of helps cycle nutrients back into the ecosystem as well. Mating, when it comes to their mating, they are polygamous, meaning that they can have multiple mates during a season, and they also mate during the season, multiple times during the season, sorry. And this kind of increases their genetic diversity and reproductive success as well. Typically, the pregnancy of a female lasts around 1 month, and they usually birth around 6 to 12 pups. And a unique factor is that males are usually absent in this parenting, and female rats are capable of postpartum estrus, meaning that they can get pregnant again right after birth, again attributing to the high population number. Now, taking a look into their anatomy comparison, their nervous system specifically, um, the Raniferri, the frog, their brain is pretty simple compared to mammals, specifically the rat, but it consists of the main regions like forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. Meanwhile, the rat, the Rattus norvidicus, is much more complex with the presence of a cerebral cortex and a cerebrum. Their spinal cord between the two is very similar, as both of them run down the vertebral column, and they play a big role in transferring information and conducting the motor actions. Locomotion is where there's a big difference, as the frog contains a unique method of using their hind legs to hop on land, and as well use them to swim in aquatic environments very easily. While rats kind of use all four of the limbs to move and are well adapted to terrestrial environments. The exoskeleton is also a common feature between the both, as both of them consist of cartilage at all their joints and extend from the vertebral column. This kind of supports the body for both animals and serves a connection to the bones and the muscles. And also, looking at another key difference, the muscles between the animals are the same as they contract and relax to produce movement, but the rat's muscles move in much higher coordination to produce the movement used due to their four legs, while the frog movements are in opposition of each other as it uses those muscles to jump. Comparing the anatomy of the digestive system between a rat and a frog. So for the rat, it has a mammalian mouth with incisors for gnawing and molars for grinding food. The frog, simple mouth structure with a relatively wide opening. Esophagus, okay, has a function to transport food from the mouth to the stomach through the peristaltic movements. And frog is just a short esophagus that serves as a familiar function of transporting food to the stomach. Same thing. And the stomach for the rat has two main regions: the cardiac region, esophagus enters, and the pyloric region connects to the small intestine. The stomach secretes gastric juices containing hydrochloric acids and enzymes for digestion. So, for the frog, same thing, has secretes gastric juices to break down proteins and digestion of animal prey. So, the rat has a longer small intestine where nutrient absorption occurs, just longer than the rat, but the effects are basically the same. Small intestine is basically divided into three segments: the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. The large intestine, where water and electrolytes are absorbed from undigested food, forming feces. It consists of cecum, colon, and the rectum. So a frog possesses a large intestine, but it's just shorter than a rat. So both frog and the rat has the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. So the liver produces bile emulsifying fats for better digestion and absorption. The gallbladder stores and releases bile into the small intestine. Pancreas secretes digestive enzymes and bicarbonate ions to aid in the digestion within the small intestine. So now the respiratory system. Nasal cavity. So nasal cavity with nostrils at the front of the snout for the rats. It filters, warms, and moistens the air before going into the respiratory system. So the frog has nostrils, but it's located on the upper surface of the snout. And it helps with olfaction and respiration. The pharynx, a common passage for both air and food, connects to the nasal and oral cavities to the larynx and esophagus. Same thing for the frog, and also starts, yeah, same thing. The larynx contains vocal cords, and then produces its basis sound production and prevents food from entering the trachea during swallowing. Same thing for the frog. It also helps during mating calls. Trachea, both species have trachea, also known as a windpipe. It conducts air from the larynx to the lungs. It's a really rigid tube supported by a C-shaped cartilage rings to prevent its collapse. And the bronchi both have bronchi or bronchi, a main air passage leading from the trachea into the lungs, and then it branches into smaller bronchioles within the lungs. So the alveoli are tiny air sacs located at the end of bronchioles within the lungs. It's a site of gas exchange where oxygen enters the bloodstream and carbon dioxide is removed. So the frog also has alveoli, but it's where gas exchange occurs between respiratory surfaces and the bloodstream. So the diaphragm, muscular diaphragm separating the thoracic and abdominal cavities for the rat, it contracts and controls the relaxation of the diaphragm, facilitating breathing. So frog has a less developed diaphragm compared to other mammals, but still has the same effect. Movements of the mouth and throat muscles also help in breathing.
To continue with the anatomy comparison, we next look at the reproductive and excretory system. We begin with the portions of kidneys and urinary bladder. For their kidneys, rats obtain paired kidneys located in the retroperitoneal space. Their kidneys consist of cortex, medulla, and pelvis. However, for reniferii, or frogs, they also have paired kidneys located in the posterior part of the body cavity. Frog kidneys lack the distinct cortex and medulla. Instead, they have a uniform appearance throughout their bodies. Frog kidneys consist of renal tubules, collecting ducts, and renal corpuscles. For the urinary bladders, Ratanorvidicus has a sac-like structure located in the pelvic cavity. It is relatively large compared to the size of the animal. Rats have a well-developed trigone. In addition to this, frog's urinary bladder is small, thin-walled sac situated in the pelvic region ventral to the rectum, very different from the rats. Instead, their ureters enter the bladder at its posterior end. Here are some visuals to help look at the systems more in depth. Now we take a look at the male reproductive system. We begin with the testes, and in Rattus norvidicus we can see that The testes are paired oval structures located within the scrotum. They produce spermatozoa and testosterone. In the reproductive systems, we can see many differences, especially between the frog and the rat. Frog testes are paired organs that situate dorsally in the abdominal cavity. They only produce spermatozoa, unlike the rat. For their scrotums, rats have a scrotum, which is a pouch of skin and muscle that houses the testes outside the abdominal cavity. Frogs do lack a scrotum, so their testes remain internal and invisible on the outside. For their prostates, rats possess a prostate gland that surrounds the urethra near the bladder. It secretes fluid that contributes to their semen count. For the male rat's penis, they have a relatively large cylindrical area with a bifurcated tip. For the frogs, they have a pair of internal testes, and the male's copulatory organ, called the cloacal organ, is everted during mating, meaning it only comes out during mating. Now for the female reproductive system, we look into different systems, including the ovaries, uterus, cervix, and vagina. For their ovaries, we see that rat ovaries are paired organs located in the abdominal cavity. They produce eggs, otherwise known as ova, along with hormones like estrogen and progesterone. For frogs, they also have ovaries that are paired and located dorsally in the abdominal cavities, and they have eggs as well. However, they do produce different eggs in rats. For their uterus, Radicus norvidicus has two uterine horns. It is where embryo implantation occurs during their pregnancy. Frogs possess a relatively simple uterus where fertilized eggs develop before they are laid. Now for their cervix, the rats have a cervix, the lower part of the uterus that connects to the vagina. For frogs, they also have a cervix, which separates the uterus from the cloaca. For the female rat's vagina, they have a muscular tube connecting the cervix to the external genitalia. Frog females also possess this, which receives sperm during copulation and serves as a passageway for eggs during oviposition.
So I'm going to be going over the circulatory system. The rat has 4-chamber heart, which consists of 2 atria and 2 ventricles. The frog has a 3-chamber heart, which consists of 2 atria and 1 ventricle. Deoxygenated blood from the rat's body returns to the right atrium of the heart. From the right atrium, blood flows into the right ventricle. The right ventricle pumps deoxygenated blood to the lungs through the pulmonary artery for oxygenation. Deoxygenated blood from the frog's body and skin returns to the single atrium of the heart. From the atrium, blood flows into the single ventricle, which some mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood occurs. The rat has tiny blood vessels, which facilitates the exchange of oxygen, nutrients, and waste products between blood and tissues throughout the body. Capillaries in the lungs facilitate the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide during respiration. Capillaries allow for the exchange of gases, nutrients, and waste products between blood and tissues in the frog, and specialized capillaries in the skin facilitate gas exchange through skin respiration. The rat consists mainly of water, along with various solutes such as proteins, electrolytes, hormones, nutrients, waste products, and gases. The frog has similarities with the rat's plasma in terms of consisting primarily of water and various solutes. Some general comparisons. The rat have lungs for breathing air and respiration and is only pulmonary. They possess a diaphragm which helps in breathing. The frog has lungs for breathing air and also breathe through their skin. They lack a diaphragm and rely on vocal pulming for breathing. The rat have internal fertilization, which occurs between male and female rats, and they give birth after a gestation period. The frog have external fertilization, Males fertilize eggs externally after the female lays them in water. The rats have a more robust skeleton with a bony structure, and they have relatively short limbs. The frog has light and flexible skeleton, which consists mostly of cartilage, and they have long hind limbs and shortened vertebral column. These are the resources we used. Thank you.